Well, Leslie, in a couple of previous videos, you mentioned how the Stat Dementia Survey came about and a little bit about how the survey was designed, some of the thinking behind it. And I do appreciate that at the moment the findings haven't been published, and so you're a bit limited in what you can tell us. But I wonder if you and Emma have any little nuggets that you could feel you could pass on, because I'm sure people would love to know.
Certainly. Well, I think the main headline is that Alexander teachers are teaching people with dementia. Not a huge number, but there are a significant group of teachers who have worked with people with dementia and have been able to do that. They've done that in a variety of settings. So they've done that both teaching people who started having Alexander lessons before they had dementia and have carried on after, people who have been in care homes where teachers have visited or been working there, and some people who have come since having a diagnosis. So quite a range. I think one of the things, another headline is there's a whole range of things.
It's not really, it didn't surprise me to find out that people are working with people with dementia, because my experience of once people have that diagnosis is that, they are actively engaged in their illness, and people are seeking, what can I do, what's out there. People are actively looking for things to help themselves. So that doesn't surprise me. And I think the idea that Alexander teachers were working with people for their diagnosis, that's an interesting relationship, because there's lots of research now that says people living with dementia will experience changes in things like gait and balance and coordination before they experience cognitive changes. So you just wonder where in that journey they were seeking that help, don't you? And unraveling that a bit more would be really interesting, wouldn't it, as well?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So we had a range of kind of settings. Teachers were adapting how they teach, which I think probably Alexander teachers would do anyway, ideally. It's not a kind of program that gets delivered to everyone the same. The kind of ways they were changing it were to do with how they explain things, lengths of sessions, and sometimes doing more hands-on work, using touch more than they might in an ordinary lesson. Sometimes they gave written information as well. So there was actually a whole range, and I think one of the key messages was that they tried to work out what was going to be the best way to teach the person they were working with, and that was just, there wasn't a standard change. It was, but those were the areas I think that there were adjustments made.
And again, that's part of the Alexander technique, and that's another overlap with dementia care, because no two people with dementia are alike, and so the essence of good person-centered care is being led by the person and their needs, isn't it? So that, again, that's a really, not a surprise, but a clear overlap between the two approaches.
And I think it's how a person differs from another person, but also how the same person differs hugely from day to day. So you'll have one day when the person you're working with is relatively bright and active and alert, and other days when they're a bit stroppy, a bit like anybody really, and you have to, adapt. Yeah.
And that's then it comes back to the fact that most people with dementia are also older. Not everyone, but most people, and most people are living with multiple chronic health conditions as well. And so that fluctuations might have absolutely nothing to do with their dementia. That might be like all of us having good days and bad days, but that equally might be that their arthritis has really flared up on that day, or their blood pressure's in their boots, and they just so it's not just a kind of working with the dementia, is it? It's a working with everything that goes with dementia, isn't it?
The whole gamut. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Any other little nuggets or findings that you wanted to share, or
well, we have
quite a bit?
Yeah, I suppose the next bit is something you wouldn't necessarily be surprised by, because it's very similar to what anyone having Alexander lessons, or what the kind of literature would tell us about people having Alexander lessons. So for some of the people they taught, there was a reduction in pain, an increase in mobility, and that's immediately after lessons, but also lasting sometimes, and also an increase in calmness, people being more relaxed, just more settled, I think, is the sort of sense that teachers in the survey were talking about. So those are, again, not unusual for people having Alexander lessons, but I think significant for people with dementia.
I think very significant. That's often, working with families a lot, that's often what families will say to me, I just wish my husband, wife, mum, dad could just find some calmness, find some periods of relaxation, and that is, and pain again, and often it's something we struggle to recognize when people can't verbally communicate pain, but that can often be a huge cause of, of distress and upset and agitation. So they're all really meaningful outcomes, if you will, for people with dementia. And I think the issue of the kind of longevity of that is really interesting, because that is an issue we have in dementia care in terms of understanding meaningful outcomes, full stop. Because, if you ask people 2 weeks later, how did you find that session and did you enjoy it? Well, most people won't necessarily remember that session, or and so actually we talk quite a lot about meaning in the moment in dementia care and in our interventions. And so that meaning in the moment, in the session, that finding that calm and relaxation being recognized as a really important outcome in and of itself as well.
Absolutely. And then I guess the final thing that came from the survey responses, we're at initial stages, I'd say, but the other thing that shone through was around communication, a different way of communicating, and hands-on work, the touch was seen as very important. And I'll just kind of look at a quote here: the sense that it opened up a direct access to the person whose identity was not the illness. And I think that's a lovely way of putting it. It seemed to help communication on a different level than was maybe possible with words.
And that, again, that is the essence of all dementia care, is our ability to communicate, isn't it? And that's at the heart of all good care. And the difficulties and the barriers that we can have with communication, that's often put down to the person with dementia and their difficulties with verbal communication or comprehension, but actually a lot of that comes from the other person involved in that communication, and our stigma or attitudes, or our not being willing or to try and communicate, or that communication is more effortful and we're not very good at listening anyway. So I think anything we can learn about ways to communicate openly and fully, that has massive implications for dementia care in so many ways, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. That's absolutely brilliant. It's when I sorry to sort of bring it back to a personal note, but my mum seemed to find, although she was someone who used to talk incessantly, most of her life, she never shut up. Now she's become very quiet and withdrawn, and quite often she clearly does not want to engage. She doesn't want to talk. But so I'll just sit and hold her hand, and it's just a way of communicating through touch. But it's very profound. You can tell it's reaching her, but it's just another way of getting through. It's so fascinating, everything you've had to say, and it's just wonderful to hear. Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.